I'm Michael Bitar, and this is Cracking the Code. Excited to have my man Paul Parker in the studio. Good to see you, buddy.
Man, good to see you again, man.
Yeah,
Been
absolutely.
a while.
Appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
I've had the pleasure of knowing Paul we're going to hold back on how many years we've known each other. We made that commitment to each other, right?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
But we've known each other a long time. Paul's got an incredible consumer packaged goods background as a leader. Many of the titles that he's held have been in the HR arena, but a much broader experience and exposure than HR, and that's what we're going to spend a lot of time talking about. But before we dive into some topics, Paul, if you could, just give us a little bit of your story.
So you want my origin story is what you're telling me, right?
Yeah.
Look, we have known each other a long time, and I was probably a lot junior in my career when we first met. And I think I was thinking about this a little bit over the weekend, like how do you get to where you get to? And I think a little bit of it is people have to believe in you. You got to kind of believe in yourself, and you have to take some chances. And so I always like to say, I probably wasn't the first person people called, but I was the one that took the challenge. Okay. And so I started out my career working in manufacturing for Nabisco. Then left that to go work in kind of much more kind of like a mini CHRO job for Campbell Soup and do those types of things where you get to partner with business leaders to kind of turn businesses around. And we worked on a business that eventually got sold. It became Vlasic Foods. I went from there, decided to go back to school and get an MBA at NYU. Did the startup thing as everybody has to do, and then landed in a global job with Nabisco. And I think it's important because primarily before I went to work for Colgate, was all domestic experience, mainly manufacturing, a little bit of ag, and I needed to have a global experience because I think I always wanted to be the CHRO. Did a lot of cool things around leading negotiations, working on turnarounds, working on restructurings. Started out in Africa and Middle East, did a global job. Then I did the North America job, went from there, went to professional services. But food is really where my passion is. Okay. And so I went back to food and worked for Sabra. And now I work for a company called OFI, which is Olin Food Ingredients. I'm primarily responsible for our global operations group, our global spices, and also our North America region, which all said and done is probably about $3.5 to $6 billion business that we do. And it's a fully integrated business from a standpoint. We have 6 product platforms. We have a food and beverage solutions platform. We have a dairy platform. We have a coffee, cocoa, nuts, and spices. And while that's important from a standpoint from the way we run our business is that we run it from a traceability, sustainability, into an end market user standpoint. So we not only trade the commodities, we also provide private label, and we have our own brands. So it's a fairly, as you know, matrix and integrated business, but a lot of things going on there. No. So that's what I'm doing today.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you. So not that titles are overly critical, but what is your title today, Paul?
It's the SVP of HR.
So you're SVP of HR. You just gave us your background. I didn't hear you say one thing about traditional HR. So what does it really mean to be in HR in today's modern business world?
Look, I think HR is one of these uniquely placed positions in our organization or in any organization because you have a fiduciary responsibility to protect the company, but you're the only position, the only role that has to be an advocate for employees. And so you hear a lot of people saying HR wants a seat at the table, but you already have that seat at the table. So what's your contribution going to be, right? So I think I talk about more what the business results are because it's really delivering results through people. And I think every company would say that people are important, but you see strong HR functions where people and companies that really believe that. Yeah. Because you have to get something done. Somebody has to put the spice in the jar. Somebody has to pick the cocoa bean in the field, right? So those people are valuable. And your investment in them and how you treat them and the culture that you want to create, like somebody has to be that advocate, right? And I think that's where HR can be really strong. But you can only be strong if your HR solutions fit the business strategy.
I love that. And it's really one of the main reasons I wanted to get a chance to chat with you today because from all the way back to when you and I first met, you've always communicated about people, HR, culture, and the business all together, not in silos, and is just always impressed with that. So when you think about that wanting a seat at the table comment, right? And I think that there are organizations that naturally have the seat at the table, and there's organizations that naturally don't have the seat at the table. But what I'm hearing from you is it's really about the leader and what that leader does with HR and how they tie back into the business. Can you just spend a couple more moments on that?
Yeah, look, I think there's probably two roles in the company that everybody thinks they can do. Everybody thinks they can be the HR person because they've hired somebody or people work for them. And everybody thinks they can be the marketer because they've been a consumer at some point in time. So I think the reality is that for me to be successful, I got to have a great relationship and partnership with our CEO, right? Or with the head of operations or with the head of spices, their CEO. And we have to be on the same page as to what we're trying to get done from a business standpoint, the type of talent we need to infuse in the business to deliver, and then making maybe some tough decisions on, do we have the right footprint? Yeah. And does the footprint need to change? And how do we do that in a caring way that shows that we still value people even if we're making tough decisions? Mm-hmm. And so I primarily work for a lot of growth companies, so I've been fortunate in that regard to not do a lot of right sizing. But when you're still trying to grow, sometimes the job outgrows the person. And so how do you redeploy that person so that they're in the best job possible? I had a boss one time that said, it's always easy to replace somebody. It's harder to grow somebody. Yeah. And so if you're going from a mindset that I want to help you continue to professionally and personally grow, and that's my commitment to you as a company, and as long as you're willing to do it and to make that investment with us, then we have a happy marriage, so to speak, right? The other thing I think is like, for me, the important thing for me is to understand the key levers in our business. Yeah. What's going to drive the growth? And then kind of what do we want our DNA to be to kind of do that thing, get that done through people. And I think a lot of times HR professionals don't spend enough time to understand the business levers, so you're rocking up against it sometimes. You can have the most fantastic program in the world you want to run, but your business just can't afford it. Mm-hmm. So then how do you bootstrap it? How do you get a little bit more savvy on what you can afford and can deliver to have the maximum amount of outcome?
I love that point that you just made, and quite candidly, and I talk to HR professionals about this all the time. I have the pleasure of speaking to leaders of HR, leaders of TA, and CEOs obviously as well. And there are not, in my opinion, enough HR leaders that are doing that last thing that you said, really understanding the business. I don't know if you say business first, but really understanding the business, and then coupling that with, okay, what can we get done, and how people are going to be a part of it, but how do we drive that component so it ultimately achieves the business results? So I'm going to ask your opinion as to why that's not so prevalent. Why isn't it more prevalent in HR leaders where they're taking that approach? Is there a reason for that?
Look, I think, and this is my opinion, right? So I'm sure at some point in time somebody will be like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I think HR as a function is inherently risk averse, right? Yeah. So it's really trying to say, it gets back to that, like, how do I protect the company? How do I protect the company versus how do I take chances to help the company grow? And so when you're risk adverse, you're thinking about what's always worked. So I love when people say, hey, I want to do stuff that's best in class. Maybe what's best in class isn't best for your company. Yeah. So let's do what's best for our company. Let's do what's the DNA of our company. And that may be taking risks that says, hey, look, we need to be a little bit more aggressive in how we go out and pay people, or maybe we need to be a little more aggressive in bringing people before the thing, build it before it comes, actually kind of thing, and they will come. So I think when you're risk adverse, you're always trying to say, what's everybody else doing? Because I can do that because at least I know if I'm doing that, I can point to, hey, right, whatever brand company does that, so why wouldn't we do it? Versus it being the right thing for you.
No, I love that. Let's kind of go toward the cultural component of a company, right? I hear a lot of people, HR owns culture. I don't know how you feel on that particular piece, but what have you seen, or what is your advice on how to combine culture and business performance?
So first, I would say HR doesn't own culture, right? Because I always say nobody comes to work for HR. We're an enabler of the culture. Like, it's our job to make sure that we have leaders that have the right skills that represent our values, our behaviors, and demonstrate that on an everyday basis. Like, we got 3,500 employees in North America alone, and only about 50 of them, and maybe only 5 of them actually really work for me, right? Right. So there's a bunch of people out there that have to experience our company in a way that says, hey, the values are represented. My leader listens to me. My leader cares about me. because that's the culture you want to have, the DNA that says my leader wants me to be successful. My leader's giving me the information so I can do my job to the best of my ability. And so if HR owns the culture, then I got 50 people, some odd people in the organization. There's no way we can touch all 3,500 people, right? Yeah. So we got to have leaders, and we have to enable our leaders to represent and know what our values are. And then we have to have a level of intolerance for people that don't live our values.
Level of intolerance for people that don't live the values. How do you help, because HR doesn't just own this, I got you, and I agree. How do you help the leaders when that's the situation, right? There's the individuals, the mid-managers, whatever, they're not living the culture or the values. How do you coach, advise, and make sure that the appropriate action is being taken, whether that be growth versus replace, or replace when that needs to be the answer?
Yeah, Mike, I think sometimes there's just a diagnostic that needs to occur. Like, I'm a believer, nobody shows up to work. Nobody gets up in the morning and says, hey, how can I do the worst job possible?
Right.
How can I be the worst human being possible today? So, like, something's going on. And I think if you just sit down and it's really like having a conversation and having a feel for it, like, what's going on in your life today? Like, what part of this don't you understand? Or what's getting in the way of you demonstrating the values that we say on all the walls and in all the meetings are important to us, right? So, and if you can have an honest discussion, maybe the person doesn't have the capability, maybe there's something going on in their personal life that they're kind of bringing to work that's weighing on them, that has them distracted, or maybe they just don't, they are an ends justify the means type of person.
Sure.
And that doesn't work in our company. So I think once you get to the diagnostic aspect of it, then that kind of leads you down a decision tree. Is this something that's trainable? Is this just a behavior that we can't tolerate? And we have to demonstrate to our company that we're committed to these types of values. And so, and that leads you to, sometimes you got to say, look, we got to part ways because this isn't the right place for you. And you're probably not going to be happy here longer term. Of the way you get things done is the way that you want to continue to behave.
I like that. I like the diagnostic component. Technology is everywhere. You and I were just talking about it a little while ago this morning. Tech is everywhere. AI is everywhere. How is it, and how do you see it evolving from an HR component? And just share with us your thoughts on tech and HR and AI.
Yeah, look, I think it gets back to the risk aversion thing, right?
Yeah.
And trying to be cautious and worried about things. So I'll take TA because we partner together. And I've challenged my group to say, how do we, when we decide to source internally, how do we screen through resumes faster? How do we leverage AI to put the keywords, key attributes, and not worry about that we're going to discriminate against somebody, but worry about how do we get through hundreds and thousands of resumes faster to get to the key components. So we went from being hybrid remote work to now we're returning to the office, right? And I said, if we just put that these jobs are no longer remote and just ran it through AI, how many jobs would they screen out for people that say they want to work remotely? Right. Well, that's not an option for us anymore. And so that's just like simple things like how do we speed up? Because I believe speed kills, right? So especially in the recruiting process, as you know, once you get the candidate there, you want to close the deal. So we have to be open to aspects and not so worried about legislative or things that we're going to do wrong. Like we can course correct for that. But let's start to dip our toe in the water and let's get better at it. Let's embrace AI from a standpoint of making our jobs easier and not look at it and say, well, okay, now we don't need that junior HR person that just sorts through resumes. We still need that junior HR person. We just need that person to do something different.
Right. No, I love that. And I think that how you just talked about AI and TA can be applied to almost every single function in an organization. And whether it be a junior role in the HR team, as you just alluded to, or any other role, AI is changing all of our lives and all of the job functions that we're doing, some in a greater capacity than others, but it doesn't necessarily mean elimination, but it means evolution. And how do you really maximize the tools that are there for you to help move the business forward to go get the business results, which you started this whole conversation on?
Yeah, I think if you think about it, like I think most HR people would say we want to do the value-added, fun, sexy stuff, and we want to get rid of the transactional work. And some of that transactional work helps you build the relationship with the manager.
Right.
Some of that transactional work can go away through leveraging technology. But the reality is a key component that TA is a good example. You ultimately got to offer a person a job. You got to interview them. You got to make sure that they fit. And AI won't get you all the way there.
No.
It will tell you if the person's qualified. And you know this, Mike. When you send us 5 candidates, all 5 of them probably can do the job. It comes down to a cultural fit.
Yeah.
And that's the human component of these things.
No, I love that. I love that. And just to talk about it from our vantage point for just a second. So it's affecting our business very similarly to what you just said, and in some amazingly positive ways. There are some incredible tools that are helping our existing tech stack or changing our tech stack, but it does not, none of them remove the human element. What it's done is that it's allowed our team that is front-facing with the client partners, front-facing with the talent, to spend more time there.
Yeah.
And spend less time on really critical components, but now those have been sped up and made way more efficient than they can be by our own eyeballs, letting the technology do that and allowing our team to spend the time to get to know, to diagnose, right, what's really going on with the individual and what kind of cultural components are going to really be the best for them and then best for our client partner. So I completely agree, and we see it very, very similarly.
If you think about AI, but I just was thinking about this as you were speaking. Like, if you think about when LinkedIn first came out, it's going to eliminate recruiter, we're never going to need a firm, it's going to be a free, all this stuff. But what LinkedIn has done is like help candidates, help recruiters, created an ecosystem where you can find out about people in relatively quick ways, right? Hasn't eliminated anything, it's only enhanced. And I think AI will do the same thing.
I agree. So let's wrap this up by talking a little bit about your advice to CEOs and HR leaders and how to make that union, a more cohesive one. What's your advice to CEOs and HR leaders both?
Yeah, look, I'm a believer that the HR person's got to be successful, almost like a chief of staff for the CEO.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
In a way that there can't be any daylight. They got to be representing each other, and people have to know that when I'm speaking or when the CEO is speaking, we're speaking from the same voice. Like we're aligned. So my advice is always find the person you can partner with if you're the HR person, right? And if you're the CEO and you really value people and you think it's important, put a number to it and say, if we have a well-trained workforce, we expect X amount of waste reduction. We expect X amount in safety. We expect whatever. And then hold the HR people accountable to deliver those things and to enhance the workforce. But it's got to be a true partnership that's based on a lot of trust and alignment. And then the HR person, you have to, if you're in a low margin business, right, you're not in, let's just say, you're not in luxury bags or cosmetics. So we're in a food business, like it's a low margin business. So all those things count. And so you can't do all the sexy things, but you can do a lot of things to improve those margins, right? And we talk about being very metric driven from an HR standpoint. Like we have a dashboard, we review it every other week. I think they review it monthly in the plans on how we're doing on the things that we think are important, Mike. And so if you take away some of the, it's just as the nice thing to do versus here's the metrics and here's your return for doing these things, I think the partnership goes a long way. And then I think from a CEO standpoint, you got to look for somebody that has your same belief system, wants to establish the same values in the company that you want to drive and that you trust will drive those things.
Thank you. And I love that, and this is what I wanted to talk about with you. You are truly one of those people that has had HR title. That's why I asked, what's your title right now? You're one of those folks that has had a lot of HR leadership, C-suite titles throughout your career, and you operate and behave like a general manager. Every time I talk to you, we're talking about the business, and there's a people component to it. Clearly, it's what our relationship is, and what's your expectation of our organization. But I learn from you about the business every time we talk because you have that overall business mindset about you. You just happen to be leading the HR component, and I just think that that's so valuable, and it's definitely not as prevalent as I would love to see it. And there are some amazing HR leaders in the marketplace, but they're few and far between. And when I talk to other people that have the head HR title in an organization, and I bring this topic up, their heads are shaking and they are in complete agreement. there just aren't enough that are taking, the business component first and then understanding how to, apply the people component over top of it. So I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts on that, man. Any closing thoughts?
Look, I think, thanks. That's the best compliment I can get in a long time. So I really believe HR, the role, the function, the leaders are critical to the organization. Unless you have a bunch of robots, you got people that work there.
Right.
And those people need to be heard and be seen. They need somebody to be an advocate for them. And at the same time, HR can really be a conduit to speaking for people that don't have a voice.
Yep.
And then at the same time, can help the company find solutions through its people that it isn't natural for the finance person or for the CEO to think about. And when those two things join up, it's amazing to see. Yeah. It's amazing to see growth. So, and at the same time, our partnership with your firm and our relationship has grown over time. And I think that I've learned just as much about search or about what the marketplace is doing from you as maybe you learned about the businesses that I've been involved in. So, Mike, I really appreciate doing this.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I'm glad to hear that. The partnership's been amazing. Thank you for coming in, buddy.
Thanks,
Good
Mike.
to see you. Good to spend time with you.
Yeah, got it.